Hi everyone, it's Blake with FishBait. In today's video, we're going to look at the new features in Laserfiche Forms 12. We'll review the new test mode, holiday calendar, scripting additions, designer updates, and more. Let's get started. So the first new feature that we're going to take a look at is the new test mode in Laserfiche Forms. You may have seen this in a Laserfiche webinar. They've shown it a few times, but we're going to cover it here as well. So on my screen, you can see that I am in the process diagram for the AP order request process, and I have a few user tasks here. These user tasks are assigned to different users. So I may have a situation where an end user has come to me and said, hey, this isn't working correctly, and I need to troubleshoot why my forms are not going down the correct flow. In a production environment, it's a little difficult, especially in a situation where you have multiple user tasks, because you then have to contact your end users and let them know that, hey, I'm going to put a test submission through. You know, it's not real. Don't add it to the ERP system or something like that. And it's a little cumbersome to do that, especially when you're dealing with large processes. So Laserfiche has created this new test mode. You'll notice up in the top right, there's a nice little icon here that we can click, and it will take us into this test process. Now by default, because this is an existing process, it doesn't have any test rules set up. So it doesn't know in this test mode who it should assign these user tasks to or send emails to. So I'm going to go ahead and click cancel on that. And what we can do is down in the bottom left, you'll see we now have process test rules under settings. So the nice part is, even though this was an existing process, Laserfiche has made it really easy for me to still add some test rules here. So you'll see it says no available test rules for this process. I can either create a new test rule, or I can add in the built-in default test rules. That's what I'm going to click on. This is what your new processes will have out of the box. And what this does is it automatically creates rules for replacing user tasks with whoever the initiator of the test process is. And you can see it's set for all user tasks. It also does the same thing for email addresses. To give you an idea of the types of rules that you can do, so we can replace email addresses, save to repository path settings. So that becomes really useful if for some reason you have a save to repository task. You don't want this to save documents or the form into the repository in a production area. You can create a subfolder or another testing folder for it to save into. And that allows you to verify that things are being saved correctly without interrupting your production environment. So if I select one of these, I can then say with, and we can put a value in there. And we can say for all user tasks or these individual steps. And so it pulls in the current user tasks. We can choose a specific one. We can also add more than one as well if we need to. So that's essentially how the test process rules work. So once we have that, we can click save in the top right. I'm going to go back to our process diagram. We'll click our test process button again, and now you can see that it's populated those rules to let us know what it's going to do once we start this. So I'm going to go ahead and hit start. What it will do is it will launch the submission form for me. And it'll put a little notice up here at the top. It says this instance will be marked as a test instance. And I'll show you what that means here in a little bit. So I'm just going to fill in the required information. We'll be part of the development team today. We will sign it and I will hit submit. So once it's submitted, it behaves just like a normal submission. Right, you get to see exactly what the end user sees here. We get our thank you page. I'm going to go ahead and close that. And now if I go to my inbox, you can see that I have that test submission. It actually notes that on the side here. So we know that this is a test. It has been assigned to me, right? I am actually logged in as the forms user. And if you remember correctly, this was supposed to be going to the Laserfiche user. So that's really nice that it comes to me. I don't have to go and contact any departments or any other end users letting them know that this is coming. If I open that, same thing, I get my message up here, and I can approve or reject or do whatever else that I need to do as part of this process to do my testing. The other places where that shows up is if we go to monitor, it denotes it there as well. So that's really nice. If you are used to going into monitor, you're looking at all your instances, you'll be able to notice which ones are tests or not. And they've actually added a filter down here with test data, so you can exclude or include the test data in your monitor filtering. So that's really nice. The other thing that you can do is if we go to reports, I'm going to go ahead and create a custom report. We'll just do a table. We have our AP order request. And we'll just add everything here. And we'll go ahead and create that. You'll notice that in my custom report, it did not include my test information. So you don't see one here for Blake Smith. So that's really nice as well. Again, it's not going to include test data into your production data for your reporting. So that's a really cool feature. This specific process, I don't have the save to repository task on there, so I won't show you that. But again, if you created a test rule, you can save into the repository into a test folder. So again, you're not interrupting production. The next feature that the release notes or the change log talks about is push-based user synchronization from directory server to forms. I'm not going to show this in this video. I actually plan on creating another video that will look at that and how the new skim opportunities within directory server work. But just know that with these new features, we are able to assign SAML users to tasks before their first sign on. So any of you that have been using SAML accounts, if you have a SAML IDP, you know that until they first log in, you can't assign them a user task, and that becomes quite a challenge. Because those users also won't get an email notification, right, that they have tasks that are potentially waiting because directory server doesn't have that email address or anything to notify them. You can do the same thing with groups now. So just know that that's there. Again, I'll have another video where I walk through that. All right, next up is the new holiday calendar for business day calculations. So to get to the holiday calendar, you do have to have administrative rights. So I will go up to the top right, click on my username, and then administration. And then in the left-hand menu, I'm going to click on holidays. You can see here the holidays that are defaulted into the system. You'll notice that none of them are marked as observed. You can then click on one of these holidays. You can see how it's configured. You can then enable it or mark it as observed, and that will basically enable that holiday for you. There are a lot of different options in here. So if we click on new holiday, we can add our own holidays for our organization. It's very similar to creating reoccurring calendar items in Outlook or Gmail. And if you have holidays where you are actually observing that holiday when it falls on a weekend to the nearest business day or next business day or the previous business day, Laserfiche actually got that feedback during the webinars, and they added in this exceptions item. So you can now select how your organization observes that holiday and create an exception for it if it happens to land on a weekend. So really cool features there. So how does this come into play within Forms? If we go into a process, I'll go into the AP order request process here. And we open up a user task. This user task has a deadline configured for it. And previously, there was a checkbox that just said exclude weekends. It's now weekends and holidays. So in order to calculate the due date, it will now take into account any holidays that you are observing for that as well. If we have a reminder set up, we can also exclude weekends and holidays there as well. So it's really nice. It's just built in. If you're already excluding weekends, it will automatically take your holidays on. So there's no extra configuration that you have to do in that case. Next up, we have some accessibility updates. Laserfiche Forms isn't 100% WCAG compliant, but they are really close. They are hoping that within the next few releases that they'll be able to say that they are 100%. But they have made a couple updates regarding alt text for images, for screen reader support, for form elements, and also increasing contrast. So those have been added in this release as well. Next on the list, we have some scripting and customization support additions. The first one has to do with the on-form submission event. They have added some additional features, so it is now the same as what we have in the Laserfiche Cloud, which is really nice. So the first thing to note is that it is now asynchronous. So we can now grab the information about what action button has been clicked on the form and then be able to do things at that point. So the example that they show here in the help file is that the user action of reject, so the button reject was clicked, and the approval comments were empty. And so they said, well, if that happens, then we want to show a field and we want to return an error message of please add comments in order to approve. So we can now interact based on when the form is submitted and do different things, such as update the value of a field. So that's a really cool addition. The other thing that they've added is support for image and link HTML components. I don't have anything to show you on this, but basically you may have a table, let's say, on a form. And with that table, you may want to export the contents of the table to a CSV file. Using the LF Forms object, previously we weren't able to do that. Some people were doing it in the classic designer. That is now possible within the LF Form object. So if you've been waiting to move some forms over because of that, that is now available for you to use. And then the last thing with scripting and customization support is there's now support for process properties such as stage and step information. Next up, we have some designer updates. The first one is one that I've been waiting for a while. There's a lot of answers posts about it, so you'll probably be just as excited as I am. It has to do with the signature field. So previously, if you added a signature field to a form, you had to create another form if you have a user task after that step where it's initially signed. And that's to preserve the signature. You would have to mark the signature field as read-only on the next form. Otherwise, the value would be wiped out and someone would have to sign it. There is now a checkbox down here in the bottom right of the field settings named Mark Field as read-only when signed in a previous step. So you no longer have to create a separate form just to mark it as read-only. So a really nice feature to add. The next thing that I want to show is there's been some updates to date fields. I myself was a little confused as to what exactly we were able to do with this, but I did talk with someone at Laserfiche and they gave me some examples here that I've added to the form to show it to you. So hopefully you're as excited as I am because there's some pretty cool features here. So the first thing that we can do, or if we look at it, if we go to the Advanced tab, You'll notice the options have changed a little. So it's now for date validation, no earlier than and no later than. Before there was a minimum maximum field here. So you can now make this dynamic. So we can say today, the today value is going to be dynamic based on whatever today's date is, right? You have tomorrow, you can say a relative date, so X amount of days before, and then you can say a specific date, or put in current date or day after current date. So that's a really cool feature. Keep in mind that current date and day after current date, they're dynamic values. So if you say that it can be no later than, for example, the current date, then it will be based on when that form is loaded, right? So if I have a form that is going through a process at different user steps and it's validating it based on current date, which again is a dynamic value based on when I'm opening that form, I may get some issues with it validating and saying that that date is no longer valid. So what's recommended if that becomes a situation for your process, you can use a field rule on the date field at specific steps and disable the field. That will make it so it doesn't run that validation and cause you issues down the road. So just keep that in mind. The next one that I have here is only week 1 or 3 of the month. So I'm actually going to preview this to show you what this looks like. So the current date, again, you can see here that I can select anything after today, and then I'm not able to select anything before that. So that works really well. The next one is the only week 1 or 3 of the month. So the first week I can select, second week I cannot, third week I can, and then I can't select after that. So that's really cool. Let's see how we did that. So again, if we go to the Advanced tab, one of the other things that we're now able to do is to allow dates using JavaScript. So that's really cool. You can see there's some JavaScript in here that is setting some different constants, and we have some different logic in here for this specific field. Just real fast, the other thing that you can use for this option is allow these days of the week. So if you need it a little more simplified, you are able to do that. So the next one is only week 1 and 3 of the month using a shared function. So first I'll open it up. You can see we have week 1, 2 is not available, 3 is, 4 is not. So what's the difference? What does the shared function mean? If I select that field and we go to advanced, you'll notice that it doesn't have as much coding as the first one. And what we're doing here is if we actually go to the JavaScript for the process, this has most of the coding in it that we're looking for. So you can create functions within the main JavaScript area of the forms process, and you can call that from your field. So if it's going to be used or going to be usable from different fields within your form or within your process, you can put all of that within the JavaScript area for the process and then call those functions from the field itself. So it keeps it a little cleaner. You only have to write it once. If you need to edit that and update it for some reason, you update it in one place. So that's a really cool feature. So to give you an idea of some of these other options that you might have, I'm just going to populate these real fast. This one is only the 1st or 15th of every month. So you'll see I can't select anything else. We have a custom error when we put something in that isn't this week. So this one's actually used based on someone typing in a value. So you can see we throw an error message there. These two actually work off of each other. So I'm going to choose December 1st. So now if I select this field and I go to December, you can see it's calculating out 15 business days, right? Monday through Friday. And then I'm not able to select the other days after that. So that's a really cool feature. This one I can put in a week number and it will automatically jump to that week for me and highlight it. The other thing that they've added for date fields is the ability to use CSS to style the date picker. So here, if I create my dropdown, you can see that we have some CSS styling going on. So to show you how that works, if I come in here, go to advanced, again, we're using JavaScript, and then it is assigning classes to those specific days. If we go to the CSS in the process, this is where the CSS styling is done. So just like a normal CSS for any part of your process. All right, the next part is, this is in a collection. And the idea of this is not to allow someone to repeat dates within the collection. So if I choose, let's say November 22nd, I add a new collection. I can't choose the 22nd again. And now I can't choose the 22nd and the 28th. So that's the idea behind that one, which is really cool. Another way that you could do this is maybe you have multiple date fields on your form and you don't want to be able to reuse any dates that were already selected. So if I choose this, you can see there's multiple dates based on the fields up above that I am not able to select. So that's a really cool feature as well. The next one was a really popular one as well for requests, and that is being able to do database lookups for checkbox and radio button fields. So the checkbox field, it becomes a multi-select field, but this is being populated from a database lookup. Same with the radio button. So let's go take a look at how that is configured. So if I go to my lookup rules, I'm connected to an external table. You can see I have the radio button set to fill, and then it's going to populate it with enrollment status. So again, if I go to the radio button, status is full-time and part-time. If I check out my form, you can see that they're just set with choice 1, 2, and 3 for the radio button and the checkbox. So it's being populated from that lookup. Looking at the checkbox, this one gets a little bit confusing. I had to ask for some clarification on this. So this one, we're setting to fill the checkbox field with the data source value of contract type. And then it has a third option for the value set to contract type. So the value is just like if you were to do the value here. We are assigning what that value is going to be for the checkboxes. So that's where that comes from. Okay, the next item is process step rule option for service task. So this is actually available in a couple different places. The first one is we go back to our preview. We can now see service tasks in the preview configuration. So those show up there now. And then also in field rules. So when we create a field rule based on like a process step, we can now see the service tasks. Some people were seeing these and some weren't. So they have gone through and corrected that. So if you weren't seeing it before, you should now with Laserfiche 12. The next item on the list is added support for custom HTML fields for using row variables. The way that this works is if we add a custom HTML field to our form and we want to show, wrong one there. If we want to show something from, let's say, our collection that we have, we could come in and select this, and previously it would just pull everything, right? So everything for the collection for that field, it's going to pull it. So what we're able to do now is we can actually add a row, and we can pull in for the specific row that we are looking at there. So one reason this was added was, let's say that we take this and we put it into our collection. If we were linking to something, let's say Laserfiche repository file, and in our table row or collection row, we have the entry ID as a value for that row, we could create a custom HTML field that links back to our entry in the repository using the web client or web link, and we can pass that entry ID in there. But we would only want to grab the entry ID from that specific row. So this allows us to now do things like that. And that's just one example. You could use it for other things as well. So overall, some really great features that have come to the designer. If you found some other ones, let me know in the comments below. They always throw a few things here and there that they don't put in the release notes, so I'd be happy to learn about them. Next up, we have some updates to the monitoring, reporting, and troubleshooting. The first one is manually completing boundary timers as an alternative to skipping a timer. So as an example, if you're doing testing, so you're using the test process that I talked about earlier, you could skip an email reminder, right, that maybe goes out 7 days later. So if you wanted to test that, you're not going to want to wait 7 days. You can skip that and actually have it complete so you can move forward with your testing. The next one is the expand relative date range support. So you can do last 30 days, this week, today, etc. So I have a report here, and I'm just going to go in to edit that. And if I come down to filters, I can now come in, let's say I want to use the start date as a filter. If I go to is in, you can see I have a lot more options for the custom reporting, which is really nice. So I can say within the last X amount of days, weeks to date, and so on. Some of the other improvements that they've had with monitoring, reporting, and troubleshooting is improved error handling for step execution failure, including support for retrying, changing the default error handling from termination to suspend. So you can actually look into the issue and then try to restart it rather than having to start that instance over. Support for retrying a suspended converging inclusive gateway step. That's been a problem in the past. And subprocesses will now suspend instead of terminating when there's no outflows. So also allowing for you to retry that. So some great features there. A couple other form feature updates. Team member synchronizations now support active directory groups containing users from different domains. So if your organization has multiple domains, you've been trying to do that, that is now supported. There is also now an option in Monitor where you can change the start date value to all rather than last 30 days. And that is done in Forms Config. If you go to Advanced Options, and we scroll down here, and it's the instance filter start date. So you can change what that default setting is. There are only two options, but you can switch between those two. There are a lot of other updates within Forms, lots of improvements on loading forms that have a lot of fields or lookup rules, things like that. Tons of fixes. There's some locale fixes as well. So if you get a chance, go through the changelog or the release notes to get an idea of what else might be included. But hopefully you've enjoyed learning about the new features that have been added. Hopefully they'll help your organization use Laserfiche a little more efficiently. If you have some things that you found yourself, again, please post them in the comments below. Let the community know about it. But hopefully you've enjoyed the video. If you have, give it a thumbs up. be sure to subscribe to the channel. And as always, keep fishing.